Who's our biggest competition? Or rather, the better question would be, why do we compete? Are we competing with something external, trying to be better than the competition that already exists? Vying for some emotional happiness or sorrow or just a fleet of emotions which is only temporary? Or are we trying to compete within ourselves as a person, just trying to be different from the competition and eradicating the word competition as a whole? Which one are we? That is what this verse is trying to tell us. Hi, my name is Varun and welcome to episode 9 in Decoding the Bhagavad Gita. In this episode, we are decoding verses 10 to 13. So without any further ado, let's proceed to the verses. Now, much like the previous videos, even in this video, we are grouping verses from 10 to 13. Now, in these 4 verses, Duryodhana, after realizing the fact that he's been quite immature, he tries to cover it up by saying a lot of good things about the Kaurava army. He first says that we have an unlimited army that is marshaled by one of the greatest commander-in-chiefs of all time, our grandfather Bhisma, while the army of theirs marshaled by Bhima is actually very limited. He got this comparison spot on correctly, where the army size-wise, Kauravas were humongously bigger when compared to the Pandavas. But the mistake that he makes on the battlefield is that he compares Bhishma with Bhima. Now, Bhima is not the most important fighter of the Pandava clan. He is an important fighter, but not the most. You have the Lord fighting for their army, you have Arjuna, you have Yudhishthira, you have a lot of people. But he is not the most important. And here Duryodhana views Bhima as the most important fighter. And hence he looks at the army, and when the battle is about to begin, he views only him as a major threat to the Kauravas. So the mistake is about not picking the right opponent, or not even viewing who is your opponent. Now, compared to this story of Duryodhana, a stark contrast on a man who knows who's his competition, a man who knows who's his opponent, and how he doesn't just do better than the competition, rather he performs to be different from the competition. Yes, I am talking about Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs is one of the guys who actually made this famous quote. So before I get into the story, it's better that I tell this quote first. Steve Jobs says, when you look at the competition, you should never say that you're going to do it better. But when you look at the competition, you're going to say you have to do it differently from the competition. And that's what Steve Jobs did. Now, as much of a revolutionist that Steve Jobs was, and one of the greatest minds in corporate history, the most important or the most revolutionary product that he made to a lot of this generation people would be the iPhone. Now, before Apple had actually got into the electronic business, there were a lot of companies that were pioneers of the electronic industry, especially the mobile industry. You had Nokia, you had Motorola, and above all, you had BlackBerry. Now, if you see the design that these people had, first Motorola had a plastic keyboard mobile phone, and then you had Nokia with a similar phone, and BlackBerry topped it all with including a mail service in the mobile phone. So now is the time for Steve Jobs to enter the market. Now, when he entered the market, he looked at the competition and he said, right, they have a keyboard and they have a lot of things going on, and I could do something better than that, or I'm going to do something completely different from what these people are doing. So he introduced the iPhone, which is the first ever multi-touch phone in the world. Now, in terms of being the first, there might be many other companies who would be the first ever. They have that, in terms of that chronological order, they may be first. But Steve Jobs and iPhone was the first phone that was commercially well off as a multi-touch phone. Now, the rest of the story from here is, as they say, the rest is history. But the most important point to underline from Steve Jobs' story is, he didn't just try to be better than the competition. Rather, he tried to be different from the competition. And there was an interviewer who asked Steve Jobs a story, much like what we all would ask when we first read that quote. It is like, Steve, when you actually do something different, what happens if you fail? To which Steve Jobs had the best answer ever, where he said, when I do something different, it doesn't matter whether I succeed or fail, but when I go back to sleep, I know that I have done something wonderful. And that is all that matters. The result is unnecessary for Steve Jobs as a person. And that's what he tries to say through that competition story. Now, you have Duryodhana on how he viewed his opponent, and you have Steve Jobs on how he viewed his opponent. Now, what this verse is trying to make us think is, which type of a person are we? Do we try to do it better, or do we try to do it different? And that's all that this verse is asking. Now, here's the thing that I forgot to mention in my previous videos. If anybody wants to check the exact description of the verses, or rather the exact translation of the verses, I've given the translation below in the comment or in the description box. So feel free to read that if you're interested. But always remember, guys, it will lead the way, and all you have to do is free your mind. This is episode 9, and until the next episode, it is goodbye.